you feel rock it, feel, touch, feel, rock it,
ноги
feel,
шаг один,
touch,
один, подоживая свои последние.
Why don't you rock it, feel, why don't you feel, touch, why don't you touch it, baby, it's just so deal. Why don't you lick it, why don't you take it, why don't you give it up, don't make me say it. Why don't you lick it, why don't you take it, why don't you give it up, don't make me say it. Why don't you rock it, feel, why don't you feel, touch, why don't you touch it, baby, it's just a deal. Why don't you lick it, why don't you take it, why don't you give it up, don't make me say it. Touch it, baby, it's so deal. Why don't you rock it, feel? Why don't you feel? Touch, why don't you touch it, baby? It's so deal.